Welcome to OutKick Live. This is Bobby Burak. Over there is Bobby Carpenter, co-host of Carpenter and Rothman on 97.1 in Columbus, and ESPN analyst. Pretty nice backdrop you got there. We've seen a lot of different ones throughout the months here with quarantine. That might top it.
Well, thanks, Bobby. I appreciate that. One of the reasons we moved about a year ago, because I thought that some of this stuff might eventually happen. They're not the quarantine, but have the opportunity to do some stuff from my house. And so I said, I need to get a little office with a decent backdrop on it. And so, this came available. It looked pretty nice. And it just finally took quarantine and all this stuff happening. I was in this thing for about 9 months before I actually set everything up and kind of moved in. I crap all over the place. There's just trash behind me on the shelves. So it forced me to spend a weekend to figure out what I'm going to put up, where it's going to be. The rest of the office, I still need things to get hung up and it needs to kind of be filled out. But yeah, it's not too bad, man. I appreciate that.
So just so everybody knows, that's not a green screen. It's not a pull down sheet. That's a real thing, because it's about 50-50 now. If everybody on TV, you find out some are even sitting in front of big TVs.
Yeah, no, this is definitely not a green screen or pull down backdrop. This is my office, and I kind of have to dust it. There's a lot of stuff that goes into it, I guess, to keep it clean and keep it presentable and make sure my kids don't hide things up there that are going to pop up on television, because they're getting old enough now to be mischievous with it.
Yeah.
But yeah, it's good.
I want to get to your career, but first I want to start out with the big news yesterday that dropped about 2:30. Joe Rogan inked a $100 million deal with Spotify. I wrote about my thoughts today on OutKick. Bobby, what were your initial thoughts on the deal? We didn't know the amount right away, but him just moving to Spotify exclusively is a story in and of itself without the dollar amounts attached.
Well, it's very interesting, and I don't study. I hadn't, I would say, studied this. The podcast set up succinctly, and really spent a lot of time processing how it works and how it kind of operates. Because at first it's how can I disseminate my information on as many platforms as possible, get it out to as many people. And then you started to see now some polarization there where people become so big that they don't obviously need traditional avenues, terrestrial radio or television to put their stuff on. You can put it on the internet. You can have YouTube, your YouTube channel running, and then also now the podcasting game. And it was very interesting to see Spotify obviously make a move with a significant investment to pull him away from Apple, which, Apple is really, is really established in a multitude of arenas, and they have a massive bankroll that they can really do probably anything they want given all their lines of business. But that's a huge move for Spotify. And I'm curious to see, what their numbers are going to continue to look like with the exclusivity that he has now with them, and if it's going to be impacted at all now that he's only on one platform.
Yeah, and a lot of people look at that, people that host podcasts, radio shows, TV, well, it doesn't really affect me because I'm never going to get a $100 million offer. And they're probably right. There's only one Joe Rogan, or only a few of his kind. But I think there is going to be a domino effect here, and this shows that Spotify is aggressively going to be a player in media, probably sports media too, pop culture media. They already acquired The Ringer for $200 million and an additional $50 million in salaries. I think this as long as Rogan's tenure there goes well, and I expect it to, I expect him to have a lot of success early on. I think Spotify is going to be looking to expand and hiring a lot of people. And I wrote today, I could see it becoming a destination for sports radio hosts. It has a lot of built-in advantages that other places don't have, including Sirius XM, which is behind a paywall.
And that's part of it. When you look at how it operates and the functionality of being able to get your product out there to market, your product being your services and your talents, it's kind of changing and revolutionizing the game. And and you say that especially in the radio, you have the terrestrial radio, you have the XM, and there's different pros and cons to each. But podcasting has really changed everything, and some people have been able to do a much better job with it than others. And it's hard for more traditional media outlets to pivot and try to embrace this because they're not set up and their organizational structures aren't designed to really function that way. And so with Joe Rogan doing this, I think people are going to monitor it very, very closely to see how the numbers look. Do the numbers justify the compensation that he's receiving? And if that is yes, or if it's even close, I think you'll begin to see this more and more. And then frankly, who tries to become the next Spotify, and who tries to go out there and then in this bidding war for talent? Does Apple step up their game? Who does something like that to be able to become more of a media player?
Well, I think that the move by Spotify, they're doing with the Ringer and Rogan, I think it cuts out a major step in that even though podcasts are so popular now and listened to and subscribed to, we've all heard the rumblings. It's hard to monetize them unless you have a massive audience. Now, Rogan does, but the average company that has podcasts can't make a lot of money off them show by show. I think with under Spotify's umbrella, they'll be able to cut out that issue and monetize it at a much easier rate. Bobby, you co-host a terrestrial radio show daily. What do you consume as far as digital media? Are you still mostly listening to radio in your car, watching shows on TV, or have you pivoted to podcasting, online shows, YouTube?
I listen to a little bit of podcasting. I do watch some stuff online, Pat McAfee stuff.
Yeah.
So I do enjoy that on YouTube. It's amazing to this because I had a conversation with one of my producers at ESPN who has children who my kids are getting to where his kids were about 3 years ago. And he goes, my kids don't watch as much television as they used to. They just watch stuff on YouTube because all the smart TVs now, it's like you don't have to sit in front of a laptop.
Yeah,
and my kids started doing that, and it drives me insane because I find these guys to be incredibly annoying because I think it's just like a watered down version of Jackass, and it's not that great. But when you have 7.5 or 7 million subscribers to your channel, like there's a lot of people watching it, and it's cut out the middleman. Like these people were able to monetize that. The ads flash up. My kids don't click through the ads. They sit there and watch them. And so I'm like, okay. I mean, this is the ever-changing world to where you don't necessarily need a massive company to produce you. If you're putting out good content, there are places to do it and ways to monetize it.
I do want to transition to sports media. Bobby, I've said it for a while. I'm curious your thoughts. I think the industry's broken. If you look at the numbers, who's watching the NFL on weekends, who's watching college football, who's watching the MLB, the NBA, the conversations the next day, they don't really represent that. I think executives are far too foolishly preoccupied by retweets, likes, shares, how political opinions sit in Instagram mentions and Twitter mentions. I just think the industry's broken. I do not think that talent are being rewarded based on their ratings and how good they are. Sports media has never been as disconnected as it is with the average sports fan as it is right now.
Yeah, you might be right on with that a little bit in some areas, especially college football and the NFL. I mean, they drive the bus.
Yeah,
and sports
exactly.
media. I mean, it's not even close. For second, I mean, college football is the second biggest professional sport in America. Like, that's the reality of it.
Yeah.
And so while other things are great talking points and people like to have discussions about them, like the majority of the interest comes when you start talking about college football, NFL, and then obviously, the fantasy that comes off of that, the implications as far as, especially right now, like how teams are going to play, how the structure is going to look. You talk about my team, but these fan bases are so big, but it's the only thing that I think really has a ravenous fan base to consume not only the content, but then the content afterwards. Other conversations about other sports, they may be interesting, but they just don't have the large amount of passionate fans. And it's amazing just, anecdotally talking to people about it. Like they'll put on, any type of, well, I'd say radio, but any type of anything in the background that is providing them content, any type of audio content that's talking about football. And they're like, they start talking about something else. I drift away. Now, that's me being based in Columbus, Ohio, and in the Midwest, where football is huge. But it's 7th, 8th biggest state in the country. There's 11 million people, and a lot of those people, whether it's Ohio State, the Cleveland Browns, the Cincinnati Bengals, Pittsburgh Steelers, Colts, Lions, depending on the areas of the state that you're in, like that's all they want to consume. And so while they may watch a little bit of the NBA Finals, they may watch a little bit of Major League Baseball, like that's pretty much it. And like I couldn't get my wife, Bobby, for the life of me to sit down and watch like an NBA playoff game or a Major League Baseball playoff game unless it's the finals. And she's like, tell me when it's game 7 and there's 2 minutes left or 2 outs on the board and this is a 1-run game. Like that's where she's at, just with the product in general, because it's been so watered down with so many games and you feel like the product's so dilute.
Yeah, I mean, several Tuesdays, like in January and February, so many shows and podcasts, radio shows would go so deep into some NBA game that was on NBA TV and got like 300,000 viewers. And they'd be like, well, look at it's got more Facebook shares. But those aren't the people watching on TV. If you're going to watch a clip on Twitter, Facebook, Instagram, YouTube, whatever, I'm not convinced that you're actually watching a show that has the same content. I think that it's a different type of audience. So why are people so worried about social media? Because it's an audience that's different, and it's much less lucrative. I mean, if you can get an audience to watch you on TV, that's way more valuable than getting 100,000 people on across social media commenting on it. I just think it's a mistake that the industry hasn't figured out yet. If they have figured out yet, they're doing a pretty poor job of doing something about it.
I think part of it is too just finding a way to monetize the digital space.
Yeah.
So we're gonna have 100,000 people view these clips. Like, how are you able to then take that to advertisers or find a way to monetize that to where, hey, this is going to be valuable? And so we can measure that metric and say, look, we had 250,000 people view this, minute and a half clip. You tag something on there with it. Okay, well, now you're starting to get into the numbers to make things make a little bit more sense. So I think that it's just the process of trying to evolve that, because social media is really an echo chamber. I think as we found that out, politically and all these different things, like, you're going to follow and subscribe to the things that you want to hear and not listen to the things that you don't. So just trying to find a way to kind of manage all that is really, I think, what the next step is.
You got to ESPN, for those that don't know, without an agent. You did it by yourself. That doesn't happen very often. Why and how did that come about?
Yeah, it's an interesting story. One, and I loved my agent when I was playing football, so I'm not going to say all agents are bad. A lot of guys have good agents, and the guy who represents me now, at Max Sports, I really enjoy working with that group. But I was coming out, I'd called a number of people. I say coming out, like trying to get into this business a year or two after I was playing, got done playing, and I'd called some people and didn't really get any callbacks. So the ones I did get, like, yeah, we'll look into that for you, and then never really got back to me. And so what I started doing while I was kind of doing that, talking to agents, is I was reaching out to people that I knew in the business, like, hey, is there opportunity to get on to do this, do that? And you're doing it all. And I tell people trying to get into this business, like, you're doing it all for free. Anytime you'll give me a platform to talk, hopefully I'll be able to utilize it. Hopefully the platform's big, and really, can I go on there and say something intelligent that makes people think and is valuable and is going to help? And so I started reaching out to people, started getting some opportunities, and they were small, but they began to grow. And at that point, I had a couple of people like, do you have an agent? I'm like, no, I don't. I just do this myself. And, I'll just take the opportunities that you give me and slowly grow this to the point where I feel like, okay, I may need one at some point in the future. And I got to that point where I thought, okay, it might be beneficial now. But I was very turned off on it because it's like easy to represent, if you talk about, the NFL, like, everyone wants to represent the first round pick, a number one draft pick, or a guy who's going into his second contract who's already been a 3-time Pro Bowl. Like, those guys are easy. Who wants to represent somebody that's kind of on the back end of the roster, who's going to try to fight and really strategically find you opportunities that put you in a place to really give you maximum exposure to where you can utilize your skills and continue to grow through different platforms, whether it's radio, TV, digital, live stuff, studio stuff, calling games, whatever it might be, like trying to figure those things out and figure out what is the best pathway for you. And that takes work. And it's more than just negotiating a contract. You can find a lot of guys that negotiate good deals. Like that's not it. You need someone that's going to try to help you. And so I was a little bit turned off initially from that. But I got to the point now where I thought, I probably needed one to maybe move forward and make sure I knew about all the opportunities that were available, across, ESPN, and then if any other networks ever got involved. But it was something like at the beginning, Bobby, I was like, people asked, like, listen, nobody called me back. Like, I would have loved to have had representation. And then I realized, like, if these guys aren't going to do anything for me, why forget them? I'll go try to do this myself and make those contacts. And so I was able to do that. And thankfully, there's some people that believed in me that gave me opportunities.
Well, I'll be honest, I cover the business you're in. I didn't know you as an analyst when the football season began. It wasn't really probably until midway through the football season, people around the industry were saying, hey, you checked out this Bobby Carpenter guy. He's really impressed on Get Up. And I know during Super Bowl week, it got around that the executives and agents stuff were high on you and high on your potential. So you kind of came out of nowhere compared to where you were just 6 months ago or even a year ago.
Well, thank you. And I guess that's a good thing. I'd started ESPN doing some ESPN3 games, in the MAC, and was given an opportunity there, and started getting on some Sunday radio and talking NFL. And so there were some people on the radio side that believed in me. They gave me that platform, and thankfully, at one point I guess it would have been during the 2018 season, about halfway through, I ran into a friend of mine, Pete McConville, who ended up taking over Get Up, and he's like, hey. You talk college football? Like, yeah, that's what I'm doing. And I do a little NFL. He's like, well, maybe you'd love to have you come on here, as we schedule this thing out. And so he gave me that opportunity and, helped coach me through it. And I'm forever in his debt for, him, helping me and just giving me really the shot. Cause you have to have somebody that eventually believes in you. And so he was able to give me the chance last year and kind of build that over through this season. And it's been a remarkable run. I'm very, very happy and excited to be with ESPN and everything, that Get Up has kind of done for me. And really as well, like Mike Greenberg, there's been a guy that's helped give me some opportunities as far as just having the chemistry to work with someone on the show and trusting them enough to ask them, a tough question. And maybe something you went over in the production meeting, maybe you didn't, and they rely on you to give a good answer. And so, whether you're one of the top A1 guys or someone that's more near the back end of the roster, can you perform when you've been given that shot? And so I've had a lot of people that have believed in me, and I'm really, really grateful for those opportunities.
How has the pandemic impacted your situation? Because obviously you're not traveling to New York or Bristol right now. I'd assume that you haven't left your area too much. Also, how do you think it's affected the industry and how it's going to recover from it? I don't know. I mean, the ratings for shows right now obviously aren't too high because of lack of sport. I think that will rebound when sports come back. I think most sports will shoot out of a cannon, and particularly football season. But do you have any concerns about the repercussions of the pandemic that's going to have on the industry?
I think there could be, because it's driven by, marketing dollars. And if the economy as a whole isn't doing as well and there's a constriction there, obviously there's going to be less to flow into the coffers of all, the networks and all, media entities. So I think that there could be a little bit of a delayed effect upon that and a delayed impact. I think it's also kind of hurt mobility and people being able to move right now. And, whether, to be able to go and audition and go talk to, executives and have an opportunity to transition from one network to another, or potentially just have expanded role within the same place, just due to the lack of travel and the inability to communicate, and the fact that there aren't a ton of live shows on right now anyway. So I think that there will be some. Working in football, I think football season is going to happen. I think college football season is going to happen, and so is the NFL. And so if they're playing games, they will need people to talk about the games after it. You'll need color commentary. You'll need play-by-play. And you'll need all of those things that work around it. And especially because that's what drives the bus, economically, you're going to have to staff that stuff out. So it's going to be a little bit different. And I would say, right now, I'm probably, not on as many things as I would like to be because of this. But it's just what you're dealing with. So you could either complain about it, which, at times that I have, or you just try to say, look at it, this is the situation you're in, and as soon as you come out of this, you've got to do the best job you can.
Do you have interest in calling games in the color commentary role? Because your style would translate to it. You are an X's and O's guy, a film guy. So I'd imagine that that's something that you probably at least thought about, whether it be in the college level or professional level. At least, ESPN only has one NFL game, but they have a lot of college football games weekly.
Yeah, it's something that, that's what I initially got my opportunity, with radio and then doing MAC games on ESPN3. And I tell people, everyone makes fun of these guys, former players that get on there and they really struggle. And I'm like, you have no idea how hard it is to call a game until you actually have to do it live, because it's quick, it turns over rapidly. And the thing is, most guys start out where really they're on a limited scale where most people aren't watching them. And so you get a little bit better. And just like anything in life, as you get more confidence, when you improve, then you're ready to take those steps. It's just tough when you're thrust into Monday Night Football or the number one seed on CBS, and people expect you then to be Tony Romo and how good he's been. And so it's tough. I have experience in it. I really enjoy it. It's something that takes a lot of work because if you want to be good at it, like you have to be prepared. But I enjoy it. And if that opportunity presents itself, I would love to. Like I've kind of pushed and wanted to explore to do that on a limited basis next year. So you said ESPN has a lot of opportunities, and like, listen, man, I'm not above anything. If you're going to give me a shot to do something, I don't care if it's a Tuesday night, wherever the heck it is across the country. Like, I'll study my butt off. I'll be prepared, and hopefully it'll be a good game, and I'll be able to provide some great insight and analysis.
Outside of media, you have a lot of business interests, I've heard, whether it be entrepreneurial or investing. Tell us a little bit about that. I'm pretty interested in that.
Yeah, so it's interesting. I was an economics major at Ohio State, went back when I got done, got my MBA in finance there. And so I didn't know if anything would ever come from media. So it's like I got to have some opportunity to earn an income after I get done playing. So we got into some different oil and gas stuff. I'm doing a lot of franchising stuff with different things, and just some different real estate development. And it's a way to kind of engage my mind on a different level. Look at pro formas, understand what works, what doesn't. Operations piece, the financial structuring of everything. I'm involved in a number of hotels, which, we're currently getting slaughtered at the moment because nobody's traveling. Yeah. And it went from an unbelievable economic time, like, gosh, this is fantastic, to, oh, there's like 10% of your rooms are filled. And looking in the future, like that may not change for another couple months. So how do you rebound, and, what do you do from that? And so thankfully I've got some great partners, things that the guys that I've worked with, and have shown me a lot of things of how this works, because I teach a class at Ohio State on private equity, and I always tell the students, like, listen, I'm going to give you some real world experience, things that I've learned, and ways for you get to understand it a little bit. But the only way you'll truly understand it is going through it yourself. You're going to make some mistakes. You're going to have to learn from them, but really just surround yourself with really bright people who have your best interest in mind. And so I've been fortunate to have that, where I've learned a lot from my partners. Like, they've been absolutely fantastic. And so, maybe in 1 year, 10 years, 20 years, I don't know, people won't want to listen to me or watch me on television or whatever medium they choose. And so I'll always be able to go and do that. And it's something that I really enjoy as well. So it's a real passion of mine. It takes up a lot more time than I'd like. And the pandemic has actually been nice because I've been able to dedicate a little more time to some of those projects without, having like the crazy travel with ESPN. So I'm around my family a little more, and it's stressed, but maybe just stressed in a different way.
One thing that stood out there, you talked about, you are going to fail. I think the biggest mistake people make in media, business, really any industry, is their fear of failure. Failure is not a bad thing. A lot of times failure, propels you to make a better decision next time, a decision that's more important. What are your thoughts on that? Because I think so many people go into, go on TV or start a business, and they're terrified of things going wrong or failing. You're probably going to fail, but it's not the end of the world. And, I can make a case that it's not even a bad thing, Bobby.
It really isn't. And it's what you learn and how you deal with it. Now, the thing is, in business, you have a failed business deal. Like, the next deal is not going to be 30 seconds later. It's going to be a little bit later. You're going to have time to analyze and evaluate. So the time frame is elongated. The thing is, in the media, like, you're going to misspeak. Things are going to happen. And, getting a chance to watch Mike Greenberg, who's as talented as anybody I've ever seen. I didn't fully realize it until I got the chance to work with him and see how good he is. But you'll misspeak, or he'll misspeak ever so often. And then all of a sudden, it doesn't compound. Like, you don't get caught up, you don't get flustered, you just move on. And so most people won't even notice it or remember it by the end of the segment. So I've tried to pick that up where, hey, there's been times you're going to say this, quick correction, and then move on. Like, take a deep breath. Don't start fast talking because you get caught behind and you feel like your time's almost up. Like, just relax, take a deep breath, and don't get overexcited about it. It's one thing that practice, the more you've done it, it makes it easier, because it's going to happen. Even the most seasoned men and women in media, like, they struggle with things, and there's times where they're going to mispronounce a name, and you sometimes you make some levity of it, you laugh, and you're like, okay, and you move on. Other times you just kind of plow through it and continue to go, but you can't let that mistake compound and then literally ruin either an entire segment or sometimes a whole show, just because you get hung up on the one thing that happened that you can't change. And I guess I learned that from football, where Coach always like, on to the next play, on to the next play. Don't let the last play impact the next play, whether it was good or bad. Confidence is great, but when something goes poorly, like, you don't have to dwell on that. We'll deal with it later when we watch it and try to figure out how to make sure it doesn't happen again.
What are you watching on TV right now? 1 year ago, Game of Thrones ended. There's been a lot of discussion this week. First of all, did you watch Game of Thrones?
Absolutely, I did. I mean, I've watched.
What are your thoughts 1 year later?
On that, oh man, I was disappointed at the end. Not as disappointed as I thought I would be. Like, I went back and looked at it. I haven't rewatched the last season yet. And this is coming from a guy who I didn't get until about middle of season 4. So I watched like 45 episodes in like 30 days. My wife and I did to catch up, and then we finished season 5. So then before season 6, we watched it all again. Before season 7, we watched it all again. Before season 8, we watched it all again every single time. I have this spreadsheet built out, this Excel doc that has hyperlinks with all the houses and all the relationships and all the families. Like, I loved it, man. I was so into it.
So did I.
I was just disappointed. Like, it went from an unbelievable movie that had unbelievable plot lines. I say movie, like just story, had unbelievable plot lines, to something that I felt like became overly Hollywood, to where the fight scenes are great, but that's not why I started watching Game of Thrones. There weren't many fight scenes like that. Right. That stuff's great, but don't let that detract from the quality of the writing and the story development. You had these unbelievably complex characters, and they were so awesome. And then I feel like you shortchanged them, and you just turned it into like War of the Worlds at the end, which, all right, that's fine. I'll go watch that for an hour and a half. 2 hours, but that's not going to consume my life the way Game of Thrones did. And so that's what was the most disappointing part, is I felt like it got shallow there in the last season.
So right now, where do you think Westeros is with Bran ruling the Seven Kingdoms? Do you think things have gotten better? I saw an article. I thought this was fascinating about imagining where everyone is right now. I'm assuming Arya is still traveling the world. I don't know about Jon. I don't know. I think Bran, he's probably a good king. He does that thing with his eyes where he can see everybody. I think Westeros is probably in a good place right now, as much as I hate that Bran is king. It doesn't make any sense to me. They did such a poor job explaining why he got to be king. I have no faith that George R. Martin's ever going to release his books. I don't think we're ever going to know why. And I don't think the showrunners know why he's king. They just know that he became king.
And that's the problem, and because they're working on a prequel right now that George R. R. Martin is helping put together, and he has a lot of creative control. And that's the one thing. Like, there were so many tie-ins with some of these with the storylines that you could only create with the writing of a book, because no one anticipates a season or a show to be this successful, where you can have these tangential characters that all of a sudden merge together like 5 seasons later, and then you see all of the history and realize, like, yeah, that makes perfect sense.
Yeah.
Because no one ever thinks that, hey, our show is going to be good enough that it'll be this wildly successful. And so I think, like, I don't mind where it landed. Like, Bran being king, okay. But there was a lot of things that he said that are contradictory to that you thought it couldn't happen. And it was really not the destination, but it was the landing of it and getting to that point to where there were so many things that weren't tied up that you felt like could have been explained more. Stuff that I'm going to probably go back and maybe rewatch the whole series again and like start talking about writing things down, Bobby, that was like, hey, I thought this would be important, never came up again. Thought this would be important, never came up again. And that was just kind of disappointing to me.
Emanuel Ogbah keeps on posting these shirtless photos on social media. I don't know. I mean, you've gotten on him a few times. I think I might need to step in because I think you guys are going easy on him. First of all, why is he doing that?
Listen, Ocho's in good shape, man. If that's what you want to do, you can do it. I mean, I post some stuff that's maybe a little bit to that level, but my wife yells at me like she's my guardrails in life.
Yeah.
So she's like, don't be that guy. And I'm like, all right. So I back it off somewhat. I mean, the thing is, if he wants to do it, that's fine. Everybody's going to get on him about it. And as long as he's fine with that, I'm okay with it. Like, because he doesn't get overly sensitive when we go at him. He actually kind of makes jokes about it now. And I'm like, hey, that's kind of how the locker room is. If you're going to be that way and you're not going to change and you're okay with people coming at you all the time, hey, it's all good, man. And so it's a little bit over the top, but you know what? He's a young guy. I always forget too, because Dan and I are about the same age. You know, Ryan Clark and I are about the same age. A lot of the guys, you know, the Get Up crew, Spearsy and I obviously played together. in Dallas, and we're just a year apart. But I always forget how young Acho is. He's my youngest brother's age. And so like I just forget that I'm talking to someone that I'm almost a decade older than sometimes.
Yeah, I mean, I don't fault him for doing it. I would just like to put him on the hot seat and ask him why he's doing it. Like, I want to hear his answer, because he does it in a way where he acts like it's an accident. Like he's trying to take a picture of himself at the beach. He just happens to be shirtless, or he just happens to be, just finishing a set in the gym. So to me, I want to know the reason why. So next time you guys get on him, at least try to get him to explain why he's doing it, because because I don't think he's doing it to prove a point. I think he's doing it for something else, but I can't figure out why.
He's a single guy, I think. He's just trying to put himself out there, make sure that all the lovely ladies know what they're getting underneath the shirt. I mean, I can respect that. I mean, I'm a married dude, so I mean, there's nothing else in that for me. But maybe Bobby, it's his form of fishing a little bit. You're throwing some lures in the water, and from what I've heard, the more poles you get in the water, the more lines you have, the better chance you have of catching a fish.
So is it harder to post those pics once you're married?
Yeah, because my wife tells me not to do it or to take them down, or she'll get on my account and take it down for me, or just won't let me do it. That they said she's my guardrail in life.
Hey, Bobby, appreciate you coming on, man. Let everybody know where they can find you next.
So gosh, I think I'll be on Get Up on Friday. Usually Thursdays and Fridays, things kind of change a little bit. I was on Will Kane earlier this week. I'll probably pop up on Golick and Wingo at some point in time here over the next couple of weeks. Then I got my show here with Rothman that I do locally on 97.1 The Fan from noon to 3. So a lot of different stuff there. And I've got a couple other things to do here this afternoon, right around my, as I'm trying to manage my son's birthday here today. So just a lot of stuff going on. So yeah, kind of everywhere, a little bit at the time.